Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Roshan, Kanesan, producer and presenter for The Morning Run and host of Ringgit and Cents. And welcome to another and the final BFM Personal Finance webinar for this season, season 2. This is done in collaboration with the Financial Planning Association of Malaysia, the otherwise more commonly known as FPAM. And today, as we close off FPAM's Personal Finance series, we're exploring the financial plans that beat the pandemic, and with the success stories of those who had planned ahead and navigated through the pandemic well. And this, in fact, we'll take a look at some of the most important lessons that will guide you over the next few months, as well as how you can achieve your desired financial goals. And to help me with this, I have here with me Rajen Devadason, licensed financial planner with Life Investment Management Malaysia Berhad, and CEO of corporate consultancy RD WealthCreation. Also, Samantha Yeoh, licensed financial planner with Vantage Advisory. And as always, Malek Ali, founder of BFM Radio and Fi Life. Now, if you've got any questions, please feel free to ask them in the comment section. This is the last session for this season. So bring in all those questions. Anything that you've missed over the last 8 weeks, please let us know in the comments section down below. We're also on YouTube if that is your preferred mode of consumption. But let's kick it off straight with the characteristics of financial plans. Rajen, Sam, what are the characteristics of financial plans that are robust, not just to withstand crises, but also to last a lifetime? Let's start with Rajen.
Hi, Roshan. Thank you. I think principles, as originally taught by Stephen Covey in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, principles are actually eternal. If principles actually change based on circumstances, then they aren't proper principles. So when it comes to core principles of financial planning, a complete plan needs to take care of 3 dimensions, in my book at least, and those are wealth protection, wealth accumulation, wealth distribution. We always talk about the importance of investing in wealth accumulation, and perhaps the most important relationship in investing is the risk-reward relationship. I think, however, it is good to be paranoid and to basically take care of the downside first. So because of that, I think, especially when we're talking about going through a crisis and not just surviving, but actually thriving, we want to make sure that our emergency buffers are large, and I can talk more about that later, and also that our liability position is either non-existent or very, very low. So those are the key things I'd like to start with.
And Sam, how about you? What are some of the characteristics of robust financial plans that we should all be keeping in mind?
Especially to handle these pandemic situations, right? First thing first, we need to review where is your financially standing right now. This is the most important thing. Mostly what we experienced throughout the past 6 months, a lot of people always actually initiate with the emotional fear first. But in fact, they have actually knowing that they have put some money into different places. It's just that they are not aware on that. So this is a fundamental that the most important thing that you must know, where are all your liquid assets, where are all your assets right now, then how to move forwards from here towards to your end goal. So this is the fundamental that I found out that if you are able to get it right during the pandemic, this will lead you to have at least get rid out of stress, the first level.
And Sam, what do you think are the most common mistakes when it comes to this? You've just listed out some of the most important criteria. What are the most common mistakes in this area?
Firstly, they do not. They save money. Some of the people have a high saving ratio. It's just that they thought that. I give an example. They put a lot of money into insurance. In fact, at this pandemic time, that they find a difficulty. In fact, I'm saving, but where are all my cash is actually my cash position is. So that cost when the pay cut is actually occur, they found out that they have a deficit in terms of their monthly expenses. So as a financial planners, what we always actually do the first thing first is to crawl out where they are in terms of their financial situations. That's the mistake that most of the people makes lah. Yeah.
And Rajen, what about you? What are the most common mistakes that you've experienced when you meet your clients or that you've observed?
I think clients tend to take a barbell approach. Let me explain that to you. Yeah. So I've already said that in my book, it is very, very important to have a sufficiently large emergency buffer fund. And that emergency buffer fund should be completely liquid and as close to zero risk as possible. So I wouldn't even take bond risk, let's say. I would keep it in the bank. I'd keep it, well, I don't advocate this, but maybe in your pillowcase. And certainly in money market funds, pure money market funds. So liquidity is important. What happens though is that some people who find themselves well equipped to deal with this particular crisis have too much cash. While I think it's important that you have a sufficiently large emergency buffer fund, you don't want to have so much money in low yielding cash that you sterilize your returns. So by barbell, I mean some people have too much cash relative to their means. And at the other end of the barbell, you've got people who are constantly investing. I mean, how many times have you heard of people who are house poor or asset rich cash poor? And you know, they've got everything tied up in pieces of property or in the stock market. And I pray that they're not in the stock market on margin, because it's pretty scary if things go wrong. So what I suggest is that for those who fall at either end of the barbell, too much cash, too much invested in illiquid investments, that they actually moderate things and they actually look at their short-term, mid-term cash flow requirements. And if they need to, they liquidate investments that hopefully are making money and raise their cash levels. And for those who are sitting on so much cash, let's say they have enough cash to tide them over 3 years of expenses. Now, I am a perennial optimist. And this wretched COVID-19 pandemic has already lasted far longer than I expected. But there's a very, very good video, a 5-minute video that's come out of the World Health Organization. The chief scientist there was basically talking about the likelihood that we're going to start seeing a rollout of the vaccines in the middle to late next year. So I would say cash buffer wise, make sure that you're okay for at least another 12 months. But if you've got too much cash, start nibbling and do so on a diversified basis. Invest. And because of the importance of cash flow and because of the low yields we're getting, invest wisely to generate higher than normal cash yields.
All right, thanks, Rajen. And speaking of videos, we've actually got a few videos coming up in a few minutes, but of success stories, essentially, of financial planning. Before we get that, I want to ask Malek, from your personal point of view, you know, you've repeatedly told us about how you've engaged a financial plan in your own life and your own ups and downs. Could you take us through personally, what are some of the most important things that you've learned from financial plans, and what have been some of the common mistakes you've observed or you've committed yourself?
Yeah, so I think I'm completely 100% around this idea of having a cash buffer. And I think, especially if you're an entrepreneur, I think, we know cash buffer for professionals can be anywhere between 6 months to, if you have a regular job, can be anywhere from 6 months to 9 months to a year, right? And kind of like this sort of situation, 1 year is kind of like probably you should be aiming for that. But as an entrepreneur, those things are even, those cash buffers are even higher. I'll give you an example. Before I started BFM, I knew that BFM, if the going was good, base case scenario, we will spend, there'll be 3 years of drought, right? In terms of basically trying to build business, cash coming into the business will not pay that much. And honestly, for the first, even before the business started, for the 2 years, I had to spend time on, applying for the license, etc. And who's going to pay my salary during that time, right? No one's going to pay my salary during that time. I'm trying to put this building blocks together. And remember, I part-time as a property agent during that time, right? So I was doing real estate at the same time. There was also another business opportunity in real estate. I was pursuing that, doing some research as well. So I was part-time as a property agent, looking at radio, looking at this and all that. So it's all about sort of building your cash buffers, or at least not being able to use up your savings so much. But before starting BFM, I was very clear. I said, you know what? I need a 3 years cash buffer where I can't assume that the business will succeed. Now, and even after those 3 years, I already had a plan B. Now, if this does not succeed, and it's just on the verge of maybe not, and I need to make some decisions, I will sell this one property that I have to fund it for another 2 or 3 years. So already, I guess I have a 3+3 plan, 3 years buffer plus, I better sell this if this doesn't work out.
3-year contingency.
And interestingly, when the Asian financial, this is 2000, we're talking about 2007 to planning stages. BFM launched in 2008. 11 days later, we had the global financial crisis, right? Lehman Brothers went down 11 days later. I remember oh my God, I keep starting businesses during financial crisis. The first one was the Asian financial crisis, now global financial crisis. I mean, come on, man, give me a break.
Tony Fernandez had a similar experience.
Yeah. And so actually, interestingly, luckily BFM was kind of like 2.5 years of cash flow negative, and we managed to get it to a stable state about 2.5 years. But guess what? Because property is so illiquid, I exercised that contingency 10 months before I needed it, right? So basically, I sold the property just to have another cash buffer of another 3 years. So in case BFM does not pan out under the global financial crisis. In the end, I didn't need to do it, and probably lost out on a lot of capital appreciation that happened during that time. But you know what? As Rajen says, protect the downside, right? Protect the downside first. Don't worry about the upside. Protect the downside, and make sure that if worst comes to the worst, your downside is protected. I think that's really, really important. I had at the time I had 3 kids, and you know what? If I didn't protect the downside, my 3, I would have to go cap in hand to friends and family for help. So that was the rationale.
Wow. Okay. That got real very quickly. But thank you, the 3 of you, for just summarizing some of the most essential parts and essentially some of the common mistakes. I think that is an easy way to kind of empathize with the situation and relate to it, right? Because we all make mistakes in our lives. And right now, we're going to take a look at some of the success stories and from actually both of your clients here, Sam and Rajen. And we're going to start with Sam, your client, Amanda Peng, who is in the MICE industry. And for those who are unsure, that's meetings, incentives, conferences, and exhibitions, essentially part of the hospitality situation. And I think we've got that video queued up. So here is Amanda talking about her experience with financial planning. Here's that video.
Hi, Amanda. Thank you very much for sort of attending. For being at this webinar about financial plans that beat the pandemic, or at least withstand the pandemic. Just wanted to ask, what triggered your search for a licensed financial planner? I understand in 2018 was when you engaged one. What triggered that?
Actually, it happens on the mid of 2018, and a friend of mine who is working in an insurance company was checking my policy. Actually, and usually I bought quite numbers of policies, and then I didn't follow at all. And then that time he said the insurance covered that I bought was not enough with the current lifestyle now. And then moreover, the insurance policy that I bought, it is ING, which is ING is no longer here, and AIA has taken it over. So that's why I didn't get any updates from, I also follow up service for that insurance agent anymore. So that's why I wanted to know whatever the saving that I have, is it enough to cover when I retire? No? So, and then Samantha, I always call her Sam, she, herself and also we were the ex-colleague before. We are in the same industry before. And then she pivoted herself into financial industry. I think it's about 15 years, and many years ago. And then I can see her persistence and her passions in this industry. And I told myself that I need to have someone that I can trust, and then to take care of my wealth and my retirement plan. So I call her and I'm preparing to share with her on whatever the debts, saving, the income that I have. And as you know, normally as friends, you will not expose a lot of things with your close friend, even though your wife also, sometimes you won't tell them also. So I did ask myself whether am I really want to open up everything, and how she looked at me as a close friend for her for so long. But I told myself, if I didn't reveal all out, then how she can help me? That's how I called her.
All right.
Yeah.
And in doing this financial plan, what did you find out? Did you find out that you had enough savings, or did you find out did you have enough insurance first? Did you have enough savings first?
No, eventually I just realized that I pay a lot of insurance, but the policy as I bought, it is not able to cover with all the medicals bills now. So that's why and the money that every month that I save, if I just put into the normal bank account, the bank interest, very low interest, it doesn't give me any extras, the savings for me at all.
Okay.
That's why I'm glad I actually restructuring all my current insurance plan with Sam. A lot of people say that you're not there to, after you actually pay up a lot of premium for 20 years or 10 years, you might not think of surrender the policy. But sometimes you need to do that. I would say that you need to do that, and then it actually improve your another plan also.
Yeah. So sometimes having to surrender your policy is an option that you have to take on, like, even though it feels really bad, right? You feel like, oh, I'm surrendering, right? But sometimes you have to do it. Yeah. Now, so you created a financial plan with Sam, and so what? Now, then the pandemic happened, right? 2020. How that financial plan was it strong enough? Was it robust enough to withstand the pandemic? For example, I think a lot of us got pay cuts during that time. I'm sure you are in the MICE industry, and MICE industry is quite tough. I'm sure you also suffered back to remuneration and a pay cut of some sorts. No need to go into details, but was your plan sufficient to take that into account?
Oh, I would say that I'm so lucky that I actually did that my financial plan in year 2018. So it is way before the pandemic happens. So at that time, Sam actually come out a proper financial plan for me. So actually, I when it comes to this, I would say the big hit like a tsunami in my industry, I wasn't prepared at all. And then I never thought of the business. We can get zero business. Yeah, from February until now, it's a very, very worse. And then my pay cut, it is up to 50%. 50%. I never had that feeling. It is so insecure feeling before. It is so hard. Yeah. So luckily I have Sam, because before that we actually having the proper financial plan. And then I actually put some of my saving. I already started the saving to certain investment. And then I did call her. The time I'm actually having a lot of stress. I do not know that if I really lost this job, where can I have the income? And then how can I overcome with all these things? Actually, then she analyzed with me that I still have my emergency fund. So in case that you didn't have any jobs in your hand, you couldn't find any job, okay, where is your source of income? Still can help you to go through this period. So eventually that I able to come myself. And then at the same time, actually my company also pivoted to another digital event business. So we are having a very tough time during March, April. Because if luckily I have Sam that tell me that financially you don't worry. You just go ahead with your company, whatever plan. Just try yourself out of the comfort zone. Just do it. Okay. So actually, we managed to change the whole business model, and we are doing quite well now.
Did you, Amanda, did you have to adjust your financial plan at all? The one that you created in 2018?
Yes, definitely. I need to adjust. As I say, I have actually having the pay cut 50%. That means I don't have much money to save. So I actually stopped the cash saving for my retirement fund at this moment. So I just use whatever money I have to sustain myself for these 2 years. So right after this pandemic, the situation recovered, I will need to catch up this portion.
All right, very thoughtful video there. I think covered a few of the key points that we covered earlier today. And before we go on to the next video, I guess, does anyone have any thoughts, anything that stood out? Because I think particularly the emergency buffer fund was something we mentioned a little earlier, right? How important it is, especially during a time like this.
Maybe we can ask Sam. What was your sort of when she saw you when the pandemic happened and I think Amanda was panicking? What was your advice to her?
Okay, the good part of us is we initiate everything before pandemic, which is 2018, meaning to say we get our navigators right in terms of her financial situation. So the moment the pandemic happens, right, I no need to actually spend time to go through the whole process again to do analysis or diagnosis of where are her current asset is. So what we do immediately, we frame it out that first level of emergency funding, she already built up 6 months. Then what we need to do is we need to build up to find out that what is the second levels of emergency funding just in case the COVID is actually prolonged. So then what we do is first thing first, we segregate her monthly expenses to a very minimum basic needs, okay, to cut down all the unnecessary needs and just focusing on the basic necessity. Then what we do is we came out a few scenarios. What if pay cut happened 20%, 30%, and the worst is 50%? How long's the emergency funding that actually can last her? So the good part is we find out that we can actually work it out for maximum 2 years. Yeah, so the emergency funding is actually can last for 2 years. So it's already give her the first peace of mind on that. Then the second thing is what we are working out is we are able to identify where are all the funding is actually waiting for her. First level is from her saving account. Second level is also a saving account because because pandemic happened, we moved all the investment back to like what Rajen said, lower risk. There's no risk at all into money market fund. Yeah. Then the third level is I said to her, worst situations, we will need to touch some of your current existing policies cash value. Worst scenario. Then lastly, if we will only touch about EPF accounts too. That's the last choice for it. But just now what we heard from her is, I think pretty good news that the company is actually able to pivot to another business model. But we hope that by next year, the company can actually back to normal situations, that her salary can be actually readjust back to the normal condition.
Fantastic.
All right.
Yeah, fantastic. I echo. I think this what you're saying, Sam, echoes what Rajen said in the beginning. Protect the downside, right? Know where the source. Know what if worst things was happen, where to draw down, what to draw down on, etc. Okay, I think over to you. I think the next video, right, Roshan?
Yeah, definitely. And we also have a video from Rajen's client here, Osman-Rani, talking about his own situation. And here's what Azran has to say about personal finance.
Azran, thank you very much for joining us on this about this financial plans that beat the pandemic. When did you first realize that hey, financial planning was something that you needed to do?
Well, interestingly, about 5 years or so ago, I listened to a BFM interview about financial planning, and made me realize that a plan and a coach, helped me go through a triathlon and improve my performance, and having an executive coach with a financial planner help me do the same to achieve financial goals.
Fantastic. And how did you find Rajen Devadason, who's your financial planner?
Well, as you know, he was your guest on that BFM interview, and he was talking about it. So I immediately reached out to him. And interestingly, the first thing Rajen said was, you should meet at least 3 other financial planners and really make sure that the chemistry is right and you're on the same wavelength, which I did, and ultimately went back to Rajen.
Okay. One difficulty, I guess, we're both entrepreneurs, and I think the one difficulty is that we're managing a business which because we're entrepreneurs doesn't pay us very much, right? On the other hand, we need to make sure that our kids are okay and we're providing for them. How do you balance this?
Sure. I think the advantage that I have is I started early, right? Back when both of us were in management consulting in the mid 1990s, and especially to take advantage of that 98, 99 market inflection point, right? Sort of kind of building it from a steady state basis. For me, it was very, very cookie cutter approach to just building it consistently so that you now have a big buffer to do what you really want to do.
Okay, all right. I actually, during 97, 98, I actually lost everything and had to build it with the, I think the 2008 crisis, I guess, so every crisis is liquidity, but you might have to wait for the next one. Now, what has, going into, so 5 years ago, you met up with Rajen, what are the building blocks that you put in place so that, then, and I guess what are the building blocks of your financial plan?
Sure. I think, first of all, there was a very rigorous goal setting process, right? Like really defining explicitly what is it that you want to do out of life. And, we even went through, these are the 100 things I needed to do, write it down explicitly, how you did narrow it down to 20, narrowing it down to 10, and the top 3 goals so that you kind of know what is it that you're aiming for, right? And then after that, for me, it's the accountability, right? Because if I'm going to see him every 2 months, I need to be able to show progress, right? Whether it is insurance, for example, right? That wasn't lined up properly. What are the things I needed to put in place, to creating some diversification across both geography and currency? Okay.
And how has that sort of plan? I mean, so Rajen played kind of almost, as you said just now, a financial coach. You
Right.
had to pay him every 2 months. You were accountable to him, and
Right.
I guess over the course of the few years, you actually created a plan which kind of like required less adjustment as you went along. How has that plan coped during this latest crisis, this COVID pandemic, where stock markets was just swooning all around the world, right? So how did your plan prepare?
So I think, first of all, from my point of view, because I was setting up to start Naluri, right? And it's been 3 years since we saw a salary, right? So I needed to have that cash cushion available and to be able to, in a way, move things around to make that happen, number one. And number two, honestly, I think it's having Rajen make the broader portfolio decisions, because I really needed to save my bandwidth to figure out what we do with the business and not have to worry about, how do you reallocate your portfolio. So just having him take me through that.
Okay, so you delegated that to him. You delegated that portfolio allocation and that sort of to him.
He's always very clear that it's ultimately my decision. He would recommend, but from my point of view, I don't have the bandwidth to kind of try to figure out what the specific market movements are. And for me, the value is just, all right, this is the chunk of portfolio that I think suits that certain level of risk. How you are going to allocate it between India and China and Southeast Asia, you got to have that level of trust.
Okay, fantastic. And I guess, what is your advice for budding entrepreneurs like us? I mean, not budding anymore. I think we're a bit a bit gray here. But what do you advise us to do, all entrepreneurs to do, as respects to their own personal financial plans?
Yeah, I think whatever plans you have for your business, the reality is, you're probably going to spend twice the amount of money and make half the amount of money that you think you're going to make, right? And so how do you really have a cash cushion and, in a way, some also alternative income streams so that you're not 100% dependent for your personal financial needs from the business?
All right, Rajen, let's go to you to break some of that down. Some very, very powerful notes there, including coaching and financial goals. How was it like when Azran first came to you? I mean, we find out that he heard of you because of BFM. Fantastic, amazing.
Yeah, I'm actually very grateful to the station as well, because when Azran contacted me, he was actually a CEO of AirAsia X. And he was just finishing that part of his journey, and then he was moving on to one startup, and then Naluri is a subsequent startup. So it's been wild. He is, as you can tell, incredibly articulate, and he is very, very, very intelligent. So it was a delight working with him. The reason that when we had our first meeting, it was just a preliminary fact-finding mission. And then I basically am always very careful to make sure that I feel that the chemistry is right. I found that I really liked Azran, but I wanted to be fair to him as well. So while I was very sure that I would very much like him as a client, I told him, look, it's probably very wise for you to go and check out other financial planners, ask them questions, find out about their values, about the core founding principles of their respective practices. And then if you like, come back and I'm happy to take you on as a client. But if someone else happens to be a better financial planner for you, then by all means, go with my blessing. And I'm very happy that he came back. Over the years, it has been a major learning experience from me. I think Sam also would agree with me that one of the wonderful things about being a licensed financial planner, being a consultant, being a coach, being someone who actually takes responsibility for the client's financial goals, but also because money impacts every single facet of life. If you approach it correctly as a licensed financial planner, you can go very, very deep. And that probably restricts our capacity to have many clients. But the few clients that we have, we can actually do a very good job. And it tends to roll out to their friends, to their family members, etc. So in Azran's case, you know the phrase he was using just now about how he felt he had insufficient bandwidth? It's such a cool phrase. And he's full of these very cool, you know, Silicon Valley type entrepreneurs who are very, very, very sharp in terms of knowing how to reach out to the global investors and to raise cash. Another phrase that I learned from him was runway. And I first heard it from him, but runway actually means that it gives you time. Just as a plane requires a massive runway, those of you who follow aviation will remember that back when the A380 was first being launched, big airports around the world had to put in fresh runways because the A380 requires a longer runway. Now, one key theme that we keep coming back to in this session is the importance of the EBF, the Emergency Buffer Fund. And for clients, both Sam's and mine, and for those, all of our peers, our licensed financial planner peers, when we put sufficiently large emergency buffer funds in place for our clients, we are providing them with a runway. It gives them basically an opportunity to get through this specific crisis. Now, Malek was very transparent when he said that he blew up during the 97-98 crisis. And I remember it was a very, very tough time. But a phrase that I learned during this pandemic is that we should never waste a good crisis. We should never waste a good crisis. This crisis will pass. Sometime in the next decade, another crisis will come along. And we want to position ourselves to be able to prosper when that next crisis comes. And how do we do that? We make sure that we are carrying zero debt or very, very low debt. And for those who disagree, you know, listeners, etc., who want to say, well, what about the difference between good debt and bad debt? I'm happy to take that question if someone wants to ask it. But zero debt or low debt, and then also having a sufficiently large emergency buffer fund. As far as Azran is concerned, we have safety net, under which we have another safety net, under which we have another safety net. So the most important thing to him, and this I found out from our very deep dive into his values, and then to his 100 most important goals, and then we segmented those goals to short-term, mid-term, and long-term. Short-term under 2 years, mid-term between 2 and 7 years, long-term 7 years onward, possibly beyond his lifespan. We spent a lot of time on that. But because of that, my level of understanding of who he is, what makes him tick, went up many notches. And so when we hit this particular crisis, we were, I think, very well prepared. I would hope that Azran and other clients choose to stay with me, God willing, if I'm, you know, still alive and strong, crisis after crisis after crisis, and that we build every time most people are actually just struggling to survive, we are actually in a position to thrive. That's the goal.
Thanks, Rajen. I think, you know, there are lots of questions that have come up over the last few weeks about personal finances. And, you know, things like, I think one of the first things I think what really struck me about what Azran said was the goal setting part, right? That was very, very important. And I think my personal belief is that whenever it comes to anything, when it comes to personal finances related, you have to have your goals, because personally, I found that if I'm investing for the sake of investing, it becomes very tumultuous when markets start to rock, right? Why am I investing? If you have that through thread there, it at least keeps you anchored. That's just my personal take on it. And
You're
actually,
spot
we've got quite a few questions coming in from Facebook, so I'm very happy to hear that. Please keep the questions coming in. We're going to get to it in just a little bit. But Rajen, I put this question to you. This is my own personal question to you. How do we go about identifying and forming financial goals? I think it's very easy to talk about it, but is there a structured way to go about it and key steps that are essential for everyone?
Yes. Now, Roshan, your question pertains to financial goals. I'm going to answer it by taking a step back. Many years ago, in an old version of the CFP Board of Standards website, there was a 17-word definition of financial planning. I use it all the time. Financial planning is the process of meeting your life goals through the proper management of your finances. Financial planning is the process of meeting your life goals through the proper management of your finances. Notice that it says life goals, not financial goals. And so what I think is very important is that we should sit down with clients as financial planners, as like Sam, myself, and our friends in the profession. We need to sit down and we need to talk to our clients and find out what are your core values, what really matters to you. From those values, we can say, okay, forget about the values for a moment. Tell me what your goals are. What is it that you want to accomplish? And then this is really tough because most people would say, I can come up with 3 or 4 or 5 goals. But when you give a client an exercise of 100 goals, the client's going to think, okay, you're just doing make work or whatever else. But it really is very important. And so Azran was actually talking about how I set an exercise to have 100 goals and then 20 and then 10 and then 3, etc. That bottlenecking, as it were, was aimed at figuring out what matters to you. It doesn't matter what the goals may be, there will be a financial element. Money permeates every part of our life. Rightly or wrongly, that's the way it is. And so my indirect answer to your question, which I hope you'll find helpful, is don't think about the money. Think about your life. Think about your dreams, think about your aspirations, think about your families, think about what you want to accomplish, and then we'll figure out what the numbers required are.
Right. So I guess indirectly, all your goals are financial goals in one way or another. Malek, we've got some questions coming in from the good social media networks. So shall we take that on?
Sure. This is from Facebook, a person called Alf Tech. And I think I'll direct this to Sam. Say, and this is where when you look at other people, fear of missing out, right? I think this is a FOMO type of question. Some pensioners make more return in the unprecedented markets in Bursa instead of fixed deposit during these trying times. And they bought into good fundamental stocks, not good fundamental stocks. Is that a wise move? What say you? I think Sam, what do you think? So you're a pensioner.
Okay, so basically, when we work with retirees, right? And basically, what we need to know is where are all your asset classes is, right? Asset classes means that how many percent you are holding in fixed deposit, a very low risk vehicle, and how many percent has you expose yourself into a moderate or high risk vehicles. So on what the questions is pertaining is the good fundamental stock is a good move because what we are working on is the high dividend yield stock, I guess, from these questions. So if it is a high dividend stock, you can actually based on the past historical price that dividends yield that they declare, then you are actually can make a good judgment on how you can actually allocate all your return is. Yeah. Rajen, you wanted to add on something?
Yeah. So
I can. Malek, should I?
Yeah.
Okay.
But
right.
Yeah. So I'll just paraphrase that a little bit. I guess equities is a more volatile component though. So what you're saying is that if it's good fundamental stock, but it's part of a whole asset allocation. Rajan?
Okay, so going back to the original question, which is pensioners and trying to generate yield, we use cash for safety. And I remember, I mean, I'm old enough to actually remember Asian financial crisis. Our FDs were actually generating 10% for us. It was wonderful. Roshan, I have no idea why you're nodding, because you're too young, you child. You. So yeah.
I'm laughing. It's 10 to 2 is the big difference.
So we went from 10 to 7 to 5 to 3. It was 3 even late last year, early this year. Now we're looking at the overnight policy rate at 1.75. So I love stocks. I actually worked as an investment analyst for Standard Chartered Securities a long, long time ago. And I do have lots of dividend-paying stocks in my portfolio, my personal portfolio. But what I'm really worried about is when people shift from full-time work to retiring and then they become pensioners, either because they have a government pension or because they have created a private pension from themselves, there is a tendency to be drawn into or drawn in by the lure of high returns. And people who have never, ever gone into the stock market may end up going in right at the start of a massive bull market, and then their only experience is straight up. And they think that that's the only way the markets go. And then if they actually are advised badly by people to go and take on stock margin portfolios, when things tumble, and things will tumble, they could get wiped out. So this is my recommendation. In this lower for longer environment, lower for longer is actually a standard catchphrase that my investment principal company, which is Manulife Investment Management, Malaysia Berhad, because Manulife is part of a huge setup throughout the entire world, the standard message is what we're putting across. We expect lower for longer, lower interest rates for longer, and therefore people require higher yield instruments. And the way to do that is you've got to educate yourself. But I would suggest don't run ahead of yourself. If you know what you're doing, by all means go into the stock market. I agree with you, Sam, 100%. High quality dividend yielding counters that have a very, very long track record. That's fantastic. But for those who either want to who already do that but want to diversify, or for those who do not know how to invest directly in stocks, then buying into dividend funds makes very good sense. This could be equity funds that buy only high dividend yielding counters. Buying REIT funds, real estate investment trust funds, might also be very, very wise. There are also ways to structure certain equity funds so that they actually generate distribution payouts, not just through reinvestment, but actually through cash flowing into your bank account. So as a pensioner, as a retiree, we need to fully shift our active income, and we need to move to passive income. The 4 types of passive income that all of us, if we eventually see ourselves as retirees over a long haul, that we need to cultivate for ourselves would be interest. Interest can be interest from the bank, FDs or whatever else. Dividends, which we may get from EPF and also from our dividend yielding stocks. Distributions, if we are able to structure them as cash distributions from your unit trust, your mutual fund portfolio. And then also rental. So not everyone can do all of this, but ideally we want these 4.
Great. There's also along the same lines, there's a question from Clement Ho saying, and this one's specific to you, Rajen. Which is more effective in beating the current pandemic market outlook? Investments via unit trust or investments via stock trading?
I have a lot.
Yeah, I think you've answered that to a certain extent, but maybe just for Clement's benefit, just to...
okay, I'll just dive into it. Now, I actually have a large domestic and international stock portfolio. I love stock investments, but I also have a global unit trust portfolio. I think this particular market cycle is really scary. All of us basically have been tracking, let's say, Top Glove, okay? I mean, it's just basically gone through the roof. The last time I checked, which I think was about a week or 2 ago, its total market capitalization was second only to Maybank. that means Top Glove is bigger than Public Bank, bigger than CIMB, bigger than Tenaga. It's quite amazing. But I also checked Top Glove's PE ratio, price earnings ratio, and it looked to me like it was more than 150 times earnings, which to me suggests, very scary. I'm not saying, for those of you who can go in and buy a counter like that, by the way, I'm not recommending one way or another. I don't have the license to make that recommendation. I'm just saying, if you were to do that, you have to get the momentum right. Do not go in on margin. But for those of us who basically want to take advantage of the generally lower market levels, but we don't want to keep constantly checking on which counters are okay, which counters aren't, which companies are about to go bust, then I think unit trust investments are far wiser, because unit trust funds, whether they be bond funds or equity funds or REIT funds or commodity funds, they're basically run by fund managers who live and breathe those particular asset classes or those particular segments. And most of us basically have a life to live. We don't want to do this all the time. Do you remember what Azran was saying about having limited bandwidth? Even those of us who can handle stock market investments directly, the question is, do you really want to do that? Wouldn't you rather just go out for a run in the evening, or go for a swim, or go out and have dinner? So it really depends. In my case, I have both stocks as well as unit trust investments. And so, Clement, I think in general, I would say for most people, unit trust investments would be better. For a tiny segment, you should probably have both. And for a real minority, don't worry about unit trust. You're just very much stock focused. But these are the people who have like the Warren Buffett kind of mindset and capacity. And unfortunately, there are very, very few Buffetts around.
Yeah. Sam, any comments on that?
Yeah. Back to Kremen's questions, it's basically the proper asset allocations, like especially pandemic time. At the end of the day, you need to actually have a proper cash flow management to cater for the emergency. Then the remaining balance you need to actually tie back to where are you right now in terms of your short-term goal and long-term goal. So short-term goal, what we cater on it is whether you have a short-term debts. So you need to actually get it right first. Then only you work on your long-term goal, which is growing your wealth, especially your education funding, your retirement funding, or any goals that you would like to buy a property. That's the whole objective. Align back to where is your goal and where should your money go, works towards for higher returns investment. Okay.
Okay. All right. There is a question here from Kiran Kaur. And I think you triggered something, Rajen, which is about which are the difference between good and bad debt, right? I must say, I still have, in spite of what you guys say about withstanding pandemics, I still do have debt on my books as an entrepreneur. So what is how do I determine whether my debts are good type of debts or bad type of debts, or should I just have zero debt?
Okay, so before I answer this, Malek, like you, I still carry debt on my books as well. I wish I were at zero, but I'm not. But what I can say is that given the fact that I am a really slow learner, and because I got into massive credit card debts in the UK in the 1980s, which took me until the 1990s in Malaysia to clear. And then because I'm a slow learner, I then promptly celebrated my victory over UK credit card debts by getting into Malaysian credit card debt. And then I could dig myself out of that hole. I'm really not a poster boy. But I will say this, to answer Kieran's question, what I see on the screen is what's the difference between good and bad debt. Okay, now for a complete financial plan, there are two statements that you want to look at. One would be your cash flow statement, and the other one is your net worth statement. Your cash flow statement has two parts, cash in, cash out. Hopefully your cash in is more than your cash out, so you have a surplus, but you could have a situation where cash in is less than cash out and you have a deficit. This situation must be fixed. It must be fixed or you will blow up. The net worth statement for a human being is the Homo sapien equivalent of a corporate balance sheet. A corporate balance sheet for everyone who's done accounting has two parts, assets and liabilities. A net worth statement has assets and liabilities. You can have good assets and bad assets. You can have good liabilities and bad liabilities. How do you tell the difference between good and bad? Kieran, I'm answering your question. A good asset puts money in your pocket. A good liability puts money in your pocket. A bad asset makes you poorer. A bad liability makes you poorer. I feel very passionately about this. I'm going to make this point. One of the reasons that many Malaysians are doing so badly financially is because of our very, very ill-thought national automotive policy. Years and years ago, when we basically ring-fenced the country to protect our nascent local car companies, we made cars expensive for everyone. The only plus point is at least our jams are not so bad. So there is one benefit. But as a result of how expensive these cars are, because of major problems with the education system in Malaysia, public education system over decades, the quality of Malaysian workers' work is not world class. Some of us are world class, not everyone. We cannot compete with Singapore. We cannot compete with South Korea. We cannot compete with Taiwan. We cannot compete with Japan. And as a result of that, our education system, our earning power is very, very suppressed. Because of that, people are now taking car loans that are 7 years, 8 years, 9 years long. And that is sheer stupidity. I don't blame them. When I first came back from England, and the very first job I had was as a cadet broadcast journalist with TV3. I started, I believe, in March 1990. I earned 1,100 ringgit. That was 30 plus years ago. Starting salaries for graduates now, single degree, as I only have a bachelor's degree, same thing, bachelor's degree, is probably in the 2002 to 2008 range. That's insane. In real terms, I was paid so much more. And so because of that, we tend to take on car loans and then take a 9-year loan. And then when we try and flip our car, say 6 years later, we realize we owe more to the bank than the car's actually worth. So Kiran, to answer your question, good debt, bad debt, if you are able to structure things like, say you buy a piece of property and you have a large down payment, you have a mortgage, and you pay on the mortgage, but your rental is large enough to be able to cover, you have good debt. What this pandemic, however, taught us is that our tenants can lose their jobs and they won't be able to pay their rent. And when that happens, if there's no moratorium, we have to continue paying our mortgage. And even if there is a moratorium, I'm not quite sure why everyone's celebrating, because it doesn't mean that the debt disappears. It just means that we're kicking the can down the road. So throughout this crisis, for every single one of my financial planning clients who was able to obtain a decent amount of business income or didn't have too much of a cut in terms of salary, I said, please, my advice to you is do not take the moratorium. Do not take the moratorium. Bit late now, right? We're at the end of the cycle. So Kiran, just last bit here. When things go wrong, good debt can become bad debt very quickly. But if you have no debt whatsoever, you'll be able to survive far better than those of us carrying debt.
Great. Fantastic. Roshan.
Yeah, so we've got what is about 6 to 7 minutes left. And if you have any other questions, please let us know in the comments down below. I think we can get to one more question. But I have a question for Rajen, just a follow-up question on that point. Yes, good debt, bad debt, these are, it's ideally we want to be living with as little debt as possible, right? But considering the current climate and our current situation and all the real macro things out there, like the prices of cars, is it really possible or realistic to live without debt in Malaysia?
There are people who live with zero debt. So if your question is it possible? Yes. But there is a price to be paid. And that price is, let's say you're a new graduate and you know that you need a car because our public transport system, let's say in certain parts of the country, are absolute rubbish. And you need a car to be able to get from A to B. The question you got to ask yourself is, do you need to buy a brand new car and then take on a 7-year or 8-year or 9-year loan? Or can you use the same amount that you would put down as a down payment and buy a second-hand car for cash and not have the loan? Can it be done? Yes. Is it done? Very, very rarely. It's almost impossible for any of us to buy a house without a mortgage. Now, I want you to think about the difference, Roshan, in taking on a loan for your own home and taking on a loan for a car. Generally speaking, when we buy property, generally, not always, prices go up. On top of that, the cost of the loan is very, very low in APR or annualized percentage rate terms. There is a bit of a cheat that is going on in the Malaysian scenario with regard to higher purchase loans for cars. For instance, if you've bought a car recently, you probably were quoted by the bank, let's say a 3% loan. And you will think, oh, wonderful, my mortgage is at 4%, my car is at 3%, my car loan is cheaper. Wrong. Your mortgage runs on a daily rest basis. Your car loan runs on zero rest, which means that if you take a 9-year loan, you're actually paying 3 times 9, which is 27%. Let's say you borrow 100,000 ringgit. Over the duration of the loan, the 9 years, you have to pay back 127,000 ringgit. 9 years is 108 months. So you take 127,000 divided by 108. That's your monthly payment. But your APR, okay, bear with me. You're borrowing 100,000, and at the beginning, at the end of 9 years or 5 years, it doesn't make any difference. You owe zero. Therefore, the average amount of money that you're borrowing throughout the full tenure of the loan, 100,000 and zero, is 50,000. But you're paying 3% on the 100,000. Therefore, you're paying approximately 6% on the 50% on the 50,000. Most people never explain this to you. So yeah, personally, I would try and if you need to borrow money for a car, I would urge you, please don't go beyond 2 or 3 years, 4 years, but if you can buy it with cash, cool. But I agree with you. It's very tough. And the banks actually don't cooperate. Sorry, Malek. Banks don't cooperate because they want you to borrow money.
Yep. I think there's it's long time due for us to have something called an effective interest rate, or type scenario for every loan.
Every single loan, absolutely.
Your car loan, you might oh no, it's a higher purchase, it's not a loan. Screw that.
Absolute nonsense.
Yeah, just tell us what the effective interest rate is, and so that you can compare your housing loan, which is really almost really there, versus your credit cards, versus your car, versus things. It's all over the place. And I had to explain this to a very seasoned businessman. Like his car loan is actually, effectively, 5%, not what he thought it was, So anyway, another question from FB, and I think, and then I think what we'll do is then we'll wrap up to the checklist of like what to do, how to create a robust financial plan. Benny Wee says trust funds or unit trust funds, I think he's trying to say, a sales charge ranging from 5.5% to 3.75%, and annual management fees. So so these are high numbers. What do you say to that? Because they will take off your yield, right, from your thing. So I think my quick answer to that, I guess generally you can buy unit trust funds for 0% these days, right? You can find it. You don't have to go very far, and you can find it. But what do you say, Sam? What do you say to something like this about buying unit trust funds with 5% to 3.75% to 3% sales charge?
In fact, as a consumer in Malaysia, the first levels that most of the Malaysians will actually bump into are unit trust agents. Yep. Then definitely you will enjoy the sales charge within the minimum 5 to 6.5%. Yep. Then the second levels of the people you will work on is the bankers. So the bankers have the limited choice of funds. It is because of the asset management company have limited, they will prioritize to the agency force for them to actually have a better choice of fund. Then the third one is depending on which services that you work with independent financial advisors. Type of service that you choose, it can actually cater you from 0% sales charge to maximum of 3%. So as a consumer, before you kickstart to initiate your investment, it is good that you go into a different type of window shopping towards to unit trust consultant, independent financial firm, or even actually go into a robo-advisor, which is the digital platform, to understand it. So each of every services that you are paying for, you need to understand that first thing first, am I the one who choose the fund? Am I the one who need to actually monitoring and reviewing and rebalancing all the investment portfolio, or there are someone that you are actually can work with to to sit down with you. Hey, this is my goal. This is where am I in terms of my holistic of my financial plan. And in order for me to actually diversify my investment, which asset classes that this is aligned back to my investment risk, my risk profile. Then that's how work into the implementation and the monitoring part. The financial planners, in fact, can work with you to align back to your goal. Yeah, so these are all the indications that you may actually review it before you make a decision.
Now, I want to kind of like summarize our whole season, our whole series. About in one, not one word. Sorry.
In one word, let's summarize 8 weeks.
Yeah. So, just to say that I guess building out that checklist of building a financial plan that can withstand crisis, and can that you can sleep soundly at night with, right? What are these key elements of your financial plan that will allow you to sleep, that withstand crisis, allow you to sleep well at night? Sam?
The keyword is flexible. Yeah, because none of us actually really expected pandemic happen. So the plan have to be flexible enough to be able to make a move like what happened to Amanda. Immediately you need to handle it because the pay cut is actually happened just within 1 or 2 weeks time. So flexibility is actually means that you don't lock everything into illiquid. You need to balance it out. Yeah, that's the indications.
Okay, Rajen, to close this, you have the final word on our whole season of webinars on financial planning.
Right. A complete financial plan has to have 2 parts. A complete financial plan has to have 3 parts. The 3 parts need to interlock. They are easily remembered using the mnemonic PAD, P-A-D. You want to take care of wealth protection, wealth accumulation, wealth distribution. Wealth protection is primarily taken care of by insurance, and you want to look at your life insurance needs. These really be death insurance, but very tough to market death insurance. It's called life insurance. Your 36 critical illnesses, your HNS, very, very important. Make sure that you got a hospital card, and then maybe your PA, personal accident. There is an aspect of wealth accumulation that leaches across to protection. It is don't put all your eggs in one basket, diversification. So when it comes to accumulation, you can look at savings, you can look at investments, you can look at speculations, you can look at gambling. I think gambling is stupid, and I'm a very bad gambler. I have a predisposition toward it, but I'm a bad gambler, so I stay away. My speculations, more or less, sometimes I made a lot of money. Usually I've forgotten and I have amnesia, so I'm not going to talk about that. I focus solely on savings and investments. You want to make sure that your diversification is across 3 dimensions. You diversify across asset classes, diversify across geographic regions, and diversify across a long timeline. A lot was said about the cost of unit trust investments. Unit trusts are not an asset class. Unit trusts are a delivery mechanism of different asset classes. You must be aware of your fees, but if you have an investment time horizon of, let's say, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and you pay a front-end fee of 6.5 or 6 or 5.5 or 5, and it's amortized over 20 years, then you got to ask yourself, is the service worth it? So that's accumulation. Under distribution, there's a difference for Muslims and non-Muslims. Muslims in Malaysia will find that they can only distribute their assets mainly based on Fara'id, the Islamic distribution law. But if they write a Muslim will, which is a wasiat, they can distribute up to 1/3 of their assets, and 2/3 must be distributed. Sorry, with a wasiat, they can distribute 1/3 of their assets to designated beneficiaries. 2/3 must be distributed in accordance to Fara'id. For non-Muslims, we have maximum flexibility. We can use a will, we can use a trust, and if you put everything together, you want to make sure that nothing falls through the cracks. Last bit of advice, if you're married, for the will, husband and wife, write your wills together so you don't leave anything to fall through.
Fantastic.
That was pretty comprehensive. Thank you so much, Rajen.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And thank you, Sam, for Yeah, thank you, Sam, for all for the all the participation in the webinars and so on. I'd love to both of you guys finishing off the series. Roshan?
Sam, you started season 2. You are also ending season 2. Thank you so much for your time as always. And ladies and gentlemen, that has been the final episode for this season 2 of the BFM Personal Finance webinar, done in collaboration with FPAM. That's the Financial Planning Association of Malaysia. And I've had the privilege of speaking with Samantha Yeoh, licensed financial planner of Vantage Advisory, Rajen, Devadason, licensed financial planner with Manulife Investment Manager Malaysia Berhad, as well as always with me here, Malek Ali, founder of BFM Radio and FiLife. Now, while this is the final episode of this series, there are still other BFM webinars going on. This Thursday, 1st of October at 1:30 p.m., the enterprise team will be talking about HR's Balancing Act. So working from home has become a mass reality for the world in a blink of an eye, and bringing it with it, well, the new challenges businesses are struggling to grasp with. So this session is going to take a look at the HR processes of growth, evaluation, performance, and unfortunately, the hiring and firing in a COVID-19 work environment. So be sure to pay attention to that, happening here on Facebook, Thursday, 1:30 p.m. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.